everybody. Welcome to another episode of Capital Spotlight. Today we have Cabelle St. Senior Advisor for Senator John Fetterman. She's also worked for Axios. She's worked for Senator Leahy. She's also got her start not on the camera, but behind the scenes on Sesame Street. Who knows? Maybe she's in the Big Bird costume one day. I don't know how that works. We'll leave it up to her. But this is a really good episode. She talks a lot about just working for a really interesting member of Congress like Senator Leahy. Got to see a lot in that most senior office on the Hill. So we dive into a lot from theater to her time at Sesame Street to Smart Brevity, a little Axios plug there, and then also her time now with Senator Fetterman. So please listen. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Capital Spotlight. We're here with Cabelle St. today, currently working as senior advisor for Senator John Fetterman, who is my senator. So shout out to Pittsburgh, also a Pittsburgh guy, Bradford, right? So
yes,
Braddock,
yes.
Wow, I should really know
Close. Outside of Pittsburgh, so
most of the letters in there were right. So
yes, I'll take it. Yes.
I feel like someone's gonna come take my Pittsburgh card from me for not knowing.
Well, it won't be me. So.
There you go. Fair enough. Well, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk.
For sure. So to start off, can you give us just a brief little overview of your career history, so people know you have a very exciting career and want to listen?
Yeah, so currently, like you said, I'm senior advisor for Senator John Fetterman. I started out a couple years ago when he came to office as his director of scheduling. Did that, built the scheduling program for him, and now I run the state and the DC scheduling. Before that, I was at Axios, where I was the executive assistant to the founders.
Very cool.
So that was really cool. It was cool seeing the other side of the press and how things are done. And I supported them. They had just brought out their book, Smart Brevity.
Right.
So I supported them with that. Any kind of travel they would do. So yeah, and then I also worked at Sesame Street as well. I was in New York City for a while, trying to sing and working at Sesame Street. So I've had it's been a real ride for sure. It hasn't been a straight path.
Yeah. A lot of very cool points to talk about.
Yeah.
And for those who know what Smart Brevity is, hopefully you get just a little hint here. We've got it very lightly stapled into the bottom of the set.
Nice.
So, that's how eventually I came to know you, is through a Smart Brevity book launch event. So
yes.
Very cool. Let's start off with your musical career.
Okay.
You're welcome to sing at any point in this episode too, and just serenade people.
Sure, of course.
But tell us how that got started and eventually how you got into opera in New York.
Sure. Well, I had always been a singer. I started taking voice lessons when I was about 14 years old, and I always pursued it, right? And I always loved to perform. But my parents said, you have to go to real college. That's the deal, right? So I went to the University of Virginia. I did opera and things there. And then I graduated in 2008 when the whole world there were no jobs.
What a great time to graduate.
It was a really great year of my life, I must say. So I moved home. And my best friend, he was going to the Laundry School of Music of Bard College in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And he was saying, you should come up here and meet the program and see what you think. So I did, and I got into the Masters of Music program.
That's awesome.
Because I figured there's nothing else going on in the world. So why not try opera?
For sure.
And I got my degree in 2 years. I starred in a couple of operas while I was there. And then I tried to, make it happen. I was doing voice lessons, auditions, vocal coachings, living in Boston, where they have a very vibrant opera scene, and then eventually moved to New York City, which had always been my dream. I always wanted to live in New York City. And so I did the same thing there, and I needed a job to pay for all of this, so I worked at Sesame Street.
There you go.
Yeah.
What a transition there. That's very cool.
Yes.
But, this is going to be lost on me, but I'm going to ask and then nod when you give responses.
Okay.
But what are some good operas that you did, or what are your favorite operas?
Sure. So the last opera that I was in graduate school was Giancarlo Menotti's The Medium, which was in English. I know it's your favorite. Yeah. And that was cool because I was a medium, as the title suggests. And I was like an alcoholic, abusive, took place in Eastern Europe. It was kind of fun. So anyways, and she could see ghosts. So it was a fun show. That's great. I love all of Minolti's works because they're in English. I think they're very accessible to, especially someone who's never seen an opera before. It being in the vernacular, I think, is super helpful.
That helps.
I was in Carmen. I wasn't Carmen in Carmen, but I was in the chorus in that. Marriage of Figaro as well, which is great. Mozart. There's so many. It's a really beautiful art form.
Absolutely.
Because it's all produced within yourself. There's no amplification.
Yeah.
So it's very hard. Like it's a very hard thing to do because you're having to sing over an orchestra.
Yeah.
And your fellow opera singers who are also very loud. So it's a lot. It's a
you gotta
lot.
have a big voice for opera. I guess that makes sense.
Yes, yeah, you have to have a big voice, and it's a lot of training and years and years of training. So it's I loved it while I was doing it. It was really fun.
How did you realize you had that gift?
I think I just had always been a singer, and I just loved to perform. And it just so happened, I wasn't, like, my parents had exposed me. I was very fortunate. They exposed me to, like, Broadway, and I love Broadway and, pop and all those kind of music. But my voice teacher, my mom found, just happened to be an opera singer.
Very cool.
And it just so happened that my voice suited opera. And so that's how it happened. I kind of fell into it.
Yeah,
like so many things in my life, I've just sort of fallen into it.
Yeah, I don't really know how else you would figure that out,
I don't either because, I think that is truly how a lot of people do it. It's just they kind of sing and, see what suits their voice best or what they like the most, Like I love Broadway, but I can't dance. So that's kind of an issue. But yeah, that's opera.
So in your time in New York, you've mentioned to me that you really enjoyed going to Broadway shows and you'd love to spend your free time doing that.
Yes.
Any recommendations of what's there currently or what are some of your favorites that you got to experience?
Oh, I saw 60 shows when I lived in New York. I lived there for 3 years.
Do you have like a rankings list?
I don't. Actually, I like to call it auditioning instead of interviewing for jobs. So I auditioned for a job with actually a Broadway producer, and I had to list out every show I had ever seen.
Wow.
And which was an interesting exercise. So I think though my favorites are I love Evita, which I feel like is fitting since it is about a political character.
There you go.
And I've loved that show for so long. And then I also really like Follies. I love Stephen Sondheim. When I saw that show, it really spoke to me because I was at a crossroads in my life. I was trying to figure out, I was in New York. I was like, should I leave? What should I do? Music's not working. I don't know what to do. And that whole show is about choices that you make in your life. And then as for right now, there's so many shows that are opening in the fall. I'm really excited about Gypsy's coming with Audra McDonald. I don't know if anyone listening to this is following along, but
I'm sure there's a lot out there. Yeah,
there's
not
a
me,
lot.
But
Yes,
there are a lot of people that care deeply about Broadway, including some of our staff. So
it's a very important thing. It's a true American art form.
There you go.
Broadway.
We love to see that.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, thank you for those recommendations on Broadway. It seems like you probably have a really good recommendation system, so people should trust you. Go watch them.
Yes.
We'll have a Cabelle list or something like that.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
We can add that to the newsletter.
There you go. But also, so you make the stop at Sesame Street.
Yes.
We have to ask, what was that like? So it's such a major, known brand that we have to know.
Oh, no, totally. I mean, I loved Sesame Street growing up. My mother would have to tape the episodes because I would cry uncontrollably when they were over.
Oh, man.
And so then she'd have to immediately just put one in to, entertain me. So yeah, working there was just, it was just incredible because you actually see the Muppets,
Oh, yeah.
and when you see them in person perform, it's really moving. They're very lifelike,
Interesting.
And I got to go to a photo shoot for Elmo. So I have all these photos of me and Elmo, like professional photos. But no, it was really cool. And they were going through a big transition at the time. Their CEO, who had been there for a long time, was leaving. And they were trying to kind of figure out how you function in this new world of children's entertainment because there's so many options now. But I worked in the global licensing department. So I supported Maura Regan, who was the SVP at the time. And she was in charge of making the money for the company. And, Tickle Me Elmo, for example, like that came out of that department. So it was all these different products, and we would have to work with the content team to make sure that they were educational enough, for kids. And then, I learned a lot about merchandising and how, you get shelving placement and how important that is, how licensing works, which is very fast. I found it fascinating.
Yeah,
how,
super cool.
You can make so much money off of a Mickey Mouse t-shirt versus a plain t-shirt, and how the margins and everything work and the guarantees. So, it was really neat. And, it was just a really special time for me, I think. It was, just think about working in like a very colorful place where there's just Sesame Street everywhere. Like my desk was just full of all of the different animals and all the different products too, the world products. Like from Korea, I have a cool bag from Korea.
Oh, that's cool.
I have makeup from Korea that's Sesame branded. It was cool.
Wow, that's very unique.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people out there might be like, well, I had a picture of Elmo when I was younger, but it wasn't with the Elmo.
Yes, this is true. Yeah.
So
the official.
Yeah, super impressive. Not many people can say that on the Hill. But so then shortly after that, that's when you moved to DC, right?
Yes, yeah.
Talk us through that process.
So, like many musicians, I gave it a good try. And, it's very expensive to be a self-supported musician.
Yep.
I've spent thousands of dollars over the years with voice lessons, and you pay for auditions, you have to pay for all kinds of things, outfits. And I just kind of got to a point where I thought I'd tried my best. I'd moved to New York, I'd done all I could. And I'm fortunate in that I've had other interests. Some people only want to do music, but I never really felt that way. So I decided to move to DC because I'm from Virginia Beach, so my family was close by. My brother is in DC, his wife is here. So I was like, well, let's just give DC a try. And we had always been a politically active family when I was younger. Or just very in tune with the news, and we always were talking about politics. Yeah. So I was thinking, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could work on the Hill while I'm there, So that's how I ended up in DC. So I moved down here and worked at Edelman for a little bit, and then I got my job with Senator Leahy on the Hill.
Which is such a great job to come into at the start, right? To work for a staple of Capitol Hill.
Yes.
Truly a legend. So tell us more about that experience. What was it like working with him? And then I'd love to hear some fun stories about that time in your life.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was 5 years that I was with the senator. So he was on year 43 when I came. And it's so interesting, having built an office like we did for Senator Fetterman versus Senator Leahy, where all of the processes had been in place for years. Everything worked. It was a very systematic kind of an office. He'd had people there who had been with him for 30 plus years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So even though I was there 5 years, which on the Hill, especially on the House side, is like a million years, I felt like a baby. I was like, oh, Cabell's the little one, because she's only been here 5 years. He was an incredible person. I learned so much from him about the Senate, so much of the history of the Senate.
Yeah, that'd be super cool.
He loved telling stories about his time with Mike Mansfield and Joe Biden and John Glenn. They were very close. His time with him in Vietnam, going to Cuba. Just all the presidents, Jimmy Carter. He is like a living time capsule of, the 70s to now. So it was really cool. And I learned a lot from the staff too, because they had been with him for so long. They'd been on the Hill for so long. They just knew it inside and out. And I was really lucky that I was able to absorb a lot of that, because it's really helped me a lot with working for Senator Fetterman now. Because through a lot of their contacts that I met, I know a lot of people in the Capitol, and just how one of the keys to working on the Hill is knowing who to call.
For sure.
And that job really helped me figure all of that out.
Yeah, that's such an amazing experience for someone in operations to experience someone who has such a process down
Yeah.
pat, that it allows you to then take a risk and go to a new member
Right.
and say, I've got you, I know how this works.
Yeah.
And that's such a valuable experience. It sets you apart for sure. It's probably why you got the job.
It is, actually, yes, because I did not apply for the job. They found me. Senator Schumer's scheduler, she texted me saying, you know, would you be interested in coming back? And I was like, yeah, sure,
Yeah.
why not? It sounds like a challenge, right? And it has been, yes, has been a challenge, yeah.
Nice. Well, so in between the Leahy and Fetterman stop, we were at Axios for a while. How long were you there?
I was only there 5 months. It was
Okay.
not long. It was
Well,
a short stop.
In your deep experience of how
Yes.
Axios worked, please tell us.
Yes. No, Axios was great. It was a great break for me from the Hill. Because I had worked all through COVID. I had been in person, and a lot of times it was just myself and the senator. Sometimes my assistant was there, sometimes the chief of staff was there. We were over in the Capitol because he was the president pro tempore at the time. So, you know, it was 2022 was just a really insane year with everything that happened. And I just needed a break. So it was nice to be able to go someplace where I was able to learn a lot, though, too. I mean, Axios is such a renowned brand. And I got to work with Jim Vandehei and Mike Allen specifically. And they're just giants of the industry, of the press industry, right? And I mean, what they've been able to create, you know, with Politico and then now with Axios is really incredible. So just working with them so closely and learning how they see things and like how it was different from the experience that I had on the Hill. I think it was just a really valuable time, even though it was short. It was very insightful.
So tell us the differences. One, we'll start with the private sector. So
Okay.
what's like the difference between the private sector, somewhere like Axios, and then working in a traditional Hill office?
Sure. Well, the pace is a lot different. Where when you're on the Hill, it's very external. You have external meetings constantly. You know, whether it's constituents or lobbyists or generals or celebrities, you know, who have a cause, everyone's coming in daily, and the senator will have several meetings with external people every day. So you're running around. There's a lot of movement constantly. There's a lot of movement of the member too, because he has to go vote. He has to go to, you know, committees. Has a press hit, you know, in the rotunda. So it's just very dynamic all the time. Whereas when you're in the private sector, at least where I've worked, it's very internal facing. So it's a lot of internal meetings, you know, with you know, just people on your team, with, you know, other people who want to talk to you. So that's a real shift, I think, just being able to mentally handle that. Like, because at times I was like, I feel like there's not enough going on. You know, like, it's like, am I missing something?
Right.
Like, I must be missing something. But it's just because, and Jim especially, I mean, you know, he's such a visionary, and he needed time to go and think about the business and like how to grow the business, and that was a really important part of his schedule. So that was different too, because I mean, with senators, you just pack in as much as you possibly can because there's so many people who want to meet with the senator. So I'd say that was a really big difference. And then also just the side of revenue too, and like having to depend on ad revenue for your paycheck, right? I mean, that's very different. Where you don't have that sort of pressure on the Hill. I mean, you just have to serve your constituents. You know, that's your purpose there, and to work for the member on behalf of the people who elected him or her.
For sure.
You know, so yeah, those are the big differences, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that changing your mindset around how work works in the private sector versus on the Hill. I struggled with that a lot when I started Connect, because I went from working on the Hill for 3 years where it's go, craziness all the time. And I was working in my bedroom at the time, like just launched a business. It was nothing yet, but it was like, I'm just hurrying. I'm like not taking time to think through what I'm doing.
Right.
And it's like, why am I rushing? Like there's nothing going on. Like,
right. And I think that the Hill can learn from that because you're just constantly fighting, right? It's like you're fighting, your fellow senators, or you're fighting the administration, or you're trying to get something passed, or you're working on a bill, or I'm on the phone talking to constituents and they want to talk to the senator. You're going constantly, and I think there's not enough time to just stop and reflect.
For sure.
And really think through how things are being done, right? Because at Axios, Jim's big thing was, if it's not working, then stop doing it.
Yeah, very much.
And I just think that the government could really learn from that. And I've tried to do that, I think, with Senator Fetterman, where, if like the process that I have created is not working, let's stop beating our head against the wall and think of something else, because it's just wasting everybody's time.
For sure. And I think the addition of revenue into that process kind of forces you to think that way more.
Yes. Yeah, very
true. If you want to
true.
survive, you have to figure out if my time is worth putting it into this effort, where there's not necessarily that same like monetary measurement on the Hill, so you can kind of get stuck in like, well, this is how it's always been done.
Yes, there is this is always how it's been done mentality.
Yeah, I think that's something that's super interesting, is a lot of times young staffers go directly into the public sector, go work for the Hill out of college, and so they've never experienced that yin and yang of profit versus what we're doing. And I'm sure some will argue like that's what's wrong with our capitalist system, but we can save that for another day. But so I do think there is that, at least in startup terms, it's called like being a lean startup, where you have to approach it from the scientific method of like, is this working or is it not? Like, where do we put our resources right now? And there's an archaic aspect, or I think a lot of people will say like, oh, well, the institution of Congress works this way, and so we have to preserve that institution. And obviously that's super important. We have to keep that. But at least from your perspective of taking your time in the private sector, how would you say the Hill can learn from that experience?
I think that everyone should have to do something other than working on the Hill at some point in their lives.
For sure.
I think that my background has really helped make me a stronger Hill staffer, because I have seen the other side of things and how, like revenue, that really drives an organization. Even at Sesame Street, which is a nonprofit, I mean, they were having revenue issues while I was there.
Keep the doors open.
Right, you got to keep the doors open. So I just think that, again, it's just kind of the reflection, I think, and just being able to get out of the mindset of, I know how to do this because I've done it this way for 30 years. That's not helpful for anything, right? And I just think that if you're able to go outside of the Hill, see how it is, right? And maybe not even just in lobbying. I mean, I think that the Hill's not diverse enough. I really think we need more people who have had, weird job backgrounds, and because it's like that's America, right? I mean, you're representing the United States. And, most people in the United States don't have the, pipeline. Like I had my internship on the Hill, and then I worked on the Hill, and then I was a lobbyist, and then I came back. I think that, the Hill could definitely learn just from, I don't think that the government should be a profit-driven organization like some people do. But there's a lot to learn from that, for sure.
Yeah, so I think that's a super interesting way for staffers to have a perspective on let's figure out how to innovate in this process too. And we've seen this a lot with conversations we're starting to have on the podcast is a lot of people are so busy on the Hill. Yeah. They're moving so quickly in what they're doing that it's hard to take a long-term approach on things sometimes. Yes. So it's really easy in the moment to react on a policy issue or to react to the hater on Twitter or whatever it may be. But it sometimes prohibits us from thinking, all right, where am I going to be in 2 years from now? How are we going to deal with that situation? How are my actions now going to affect me then? Yes. And so it's hard to keep that mindset. It
is. And I think staffs need almost two staffs, right? Where you can it's like you have a layer that's dealing with the long-term strategy, but then you also have a layer that's dealing with the day-to-day, right? Because we struggle with that in my office. Every office does, for sure. Because something in the news cycle will hit. and I'll have all these great intentions, like, oh, we're going to talk about the long-term, political whatever schedule, and we're going to do all these things, and I got to, we're going to set up this meeting with the senator and with the exec team, and then, something hits in the news.
Yeah, 2 days
and
later,
then
that never happened.
Yeah, and then that takes over for your life for the next 2 weeks.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I think there are definitely ways to do it, because I think it's important. I think we're really seeing now in the Congress what happens when you don't think long term.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we're not doing a whole lot right now, because there's not a lot of forward thinking. And Senator Leahy used to talk about that a lot too. How there's just too much fighting, there's too much conflict, it's too much of the now, and not so much of like, what are we going to do in the future?
Yeah, for sure. And if you're talking about the past a lot too, that doesn't help. Of like, all right, we understand we messed up in the past, but like, let's move forward and figure that out. But so I like your idea of like, okay, staffers need a staff for themselves.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to pull this all together. But in your expert opinion, as an operations staffer, how can staffers create more time for themselves and be more efficient in their process?
That's a great question that I try to figure out every day, because it is hard, and then the more senior you get, the more stuff you have to deal with. And it's not just in your department necessarily, it's like, across the whole organization. So, I mean, things that I try to do is I just really try to prioritize what's going on, because for when you work in scheduling, everything to everyone is an emergency.
Yeah.
But it's not an emergency to me, and it's not an emergency to the member, right? Because if everything were an emergency, we wouldn't be able to function. Like there would be no meetings, nothing would happen. So as in doing operations, you have to really be able to step outside of the situation and see, okay, this person is coming to me, this thing is this week and it's very important, so this will be my first priority for the week. This trip is coming up, but it's not for a month, so maybe that's my fourth priority.
Yeah.
And just really listing everything out. And I print out this senator's schedule every day, and I write down everything that I want to have done by the end of the day, right? And then I add to it as the day goes on. Sometimes I do it on my phone, it just depends. And I'll number it again, like that, like by priority. Yeah. And then I'll sit down with my team at the end of the day, and I'll go through my list, and I'll say, oh, okay, well, I wasn't able to call this person, so we're putting that on the list for tomorrow.
Sure. Yeah.
But like put it as number 2, because it's still, you can kind of float that one, you know? So I think that's really important, and I think that managers should really need to emphasize that with their staffs, because so again, it's like you're very siloed almost in what you do on the Hill, especially on the policy side, because you just work in your policy area. And to you, it's the most important thing, which of course, you've dedicated your life to agriculture, but for the portfolio as a whole, it's maybe like number 5 this week,
right.
So I think that managers especially just really need to teach the staff how to manage their time and prioritize things, and also just setting expectations. I think that really can help too, and I think that can help just kind of give you time back, because it's like I have this, if you give people the expectation that like it's going to happen right now, and then you're freaked out and like you can't do anything else because it's going to happen right now, but then actually it doesn't happen for 3 days. Yeah. That's like 3 days that you've wasted where you could have done something productive.
Yeah, that's hard. I think the other thing I experienced on the Hill is an adverse reaction to technology. Like whether it was like Slack or Asana, stuff like that, where in the private sector,
that's what you'd use.
Yeah, what you use. But it doesn't seem prevalent on the Hill, and the offices that do use it, you're like, whoa, like you're in the 21st century.
Yes, yes.
So I don't know. That's my piece. Like maybe use some more technology in the process too. I don't know, but it's not really how the Hill works, I guess.
No, and it's so, and that's what's interesting too, because Ann Berry, she's the Secretary of the Senate now, and she was our Deputy Chief of Staff for Senator Leahy. She used to always say that it's 100 different corporations.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Startups.
In one building, and everybody does things differently. Because if I went to go work for, I don't know, like Senator Merkley tomorrow, it would be totally different from how I do things with Senator Fetterman. Even if I had the same job title, because it just, it's how the member, it all starts from the top, right? And it's kind of how the member and the chief of staff want to structure things.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think that technology can always help. We actually are a very technology forward office because of the senator's auditory processing issues.
Gotcha.
We've had to really work with the captionings and figure out how to best serve him,
sure.
while he's at the Senate. So with that, we've been able to also just, kind of add in a lot of different other tech features that I think have really helped with workload and flow and everything.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. I think that your time on the Hill has also allowed you to experience bipartisanship in an interesting way, because as a scheduler, you got to interact with everyone.
Yes.
So how has that process helped you collaborate across the aisle and build those relationships that matter? Because it's extremely important to your job and to your office.
Right. No, of course. Yeah, it really is. I think being a scheduler it's non-political almost, right? I mean, it's obviously political because you work for a member, but like you said, I mean, my goal at the end of the day is that that the senator is doing what he needs to do on a daily basis, and like, how do I support that, right? How do I get him where he needs to go? What meetings does he need to take? And if that means I have to call Lindsey Graham scheduler, then I'm going to call Lindsey Graham scheduler, Or sometimes, I'll have read something in Politico and I'll be like, Ted Cruz went and did this. Let me call his scheduler. Maybe they can get me the phone number for, whatever, Department of Energy thing. Because there's only 100 of us in the world who do this job for the Senate, right? Yeah. And it's a very unique kind of job. You cannot find this sort of job in the private sector, right? Like we talked about. So, I think we just have to support each other and just help out how we can, because at the end of the day, we're serving the Senate, and the Senate is a bipartisan institution.
Yeah, that Senate or House scheduler listserv is a prolific place.
Yes.
I feel like that's where the information comes in.
Oh, yes.
They're the most productive. Like, that's where you find out about events.
If you need a phone number, you should, just email a scheduler. They will be able to help you out. And they can always, it's amazing. Like the vast amount of knowledge that some of these schedulers have who have been on the Hill for a long time. It's like super obscure, I'll be like 5 years ago, I remember I talked to Senator Leahy about this one thing and it was this one person, and I can, call somebody and they're like, oh yeah, I have their phone number. Yeah. It's amazing.
That's wild. A good scheduler is so great for an office. It just makes your life better. Yeah. Everyone in the office.
Oh yes. No, I think it's, not to toot my own horn, but I think it is really, it's the most important job in an office.
For sure.
Because you're managing the senator, and everything he does or she does or they do, that affects what the office does. And if the member is moving and it's smooth and everything is functioning, then the rest of the office will function well. Yeah. But if scheduling's a disaster, nothing works. Just forget it. Pack it in.
Real quick.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so to wrap up, we want to know who you are outside of work. So obviously, you love music, you love Broadway, but what else defines you uniquely that people can be, oh, I like that too, let me reach out to her?
I love the beach. I'm from Virginia Beach.
Cool.
So I'm actually going there for this Labor Day weekend, get some sun before we come back into session. I love to read. I'm one of those ladies. I'm very into the romance novels now. Okay. So if you're into that, let me know. I'm always looking for suggestions. I love to travel. I just went to the Canary Islands off the coast of Africa. That was really cool. I love Spanish too. I actually double majored in Spanish and Latin American studies when I was at UVA. Cool. And I still can kind of speak it. So it was fun on the Canary Islands because they're part of Spain, so I was able to speak Spanish. Cool. But I love anything Spanish, anything Latin American, the culture, the language. Same with like Brazil and Portuguese. I took Portuguese at one point. So yeah, that's the stuff I like.
Very cool. So if any of that interests you, make sure to reach out. Maybe even use Connect. Well, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
This was a great conversation, and love to have you again. So
I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening, guys. Hey, it's David again. Thank you guys for listening today. We're really excited about this Capital Spotlight podcast and getting it off the ground. So make sure to tune in again. And the easiest way to do that is subscribe to our channels. Check us out on social media at Connect App, CNCT, APP, basically everywhere. So find us there, subscribe to our newsletter, and check out our website, capitalconnect with an O.com. Thanks, guys.